Welcome. I'm Leanne Meier, your host, and this is Once a Nurse, Always a Nurse. I'm so proud to be able to come back and be able to share these stories with you. I actually started Once a Nurse in 2017 with the idea of having it be a foundation for nurse stories, for nurses to be able to get their voices out. And boy, oh boy, have we had a lot of nurse voices since then. And it just continues on. So it's very exciting. And I'm so happy to have so many people contacting me, commenting, sending other people to me, asking questions, etc. And I hope that you will continue to do that. Once a Nurse is locatable for YouTube on Once a Nurse with Leanne Meier. And for Spotify and some of the other foundational platforms for podcasts, it's Once a Nurse, the original. So if you're having trouble finding us, that might help a little bit. One of the things that this podcast led to is a project that I've been working on with two other colleagues, and that is powerupnursing.com. And my producer and friend, Tanya Abreu, and also Dr. Alba Rodriguez and I put this together, and we have been having a lot of fun with getting nurses involved in understanding how much you have power. We have power that we don't recognize that we have. So Power Up Nursing, our next thing will be a cruise in April 21st to the 26th. And the three areas that we're going to be focusing on is self-care, career care, and transforming healthcare. So my guest today is going to be one of the speakers for the career care aspect. And so I'm really eager to bring her in. Her name is Cheryl Field. And she has quite a background and lots of interesting things. So Cheryl, come on in. Welcome, Cheryl. So glad to see you. Thank you for coming. So I'm just going to briefly go over a little bit of Cheryl's background so that people who might not know you will have a better idea of where you're coming from. So Cheryl has 30 years of experience in nursing, specializing in rehab in the post-acute area with focus on analytics, compliance, quality, and reimbursement. She served in a variety of really interesting roles, including clinical director, vice president of healthcare, chief product officer, and group product leader. I don't know what all of those differentiate out as, but we'll maybe get to that. So Cheryl has spoken also at state and national conventions for over 25 years on a variety of healthcare topics. She makes learning complex systems easy with simple analogies, relevant and other personal stories, and she maximizes, excuse me, the audience engagement. Cheryl is certified in rehabilitation nursing and recently achieved certification in machine learning and artificial intelligence from MIT. Now I'm really impressed. So she holds a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from the University of Rochester and a Master's in Science in Nursing from Boston College. So Cheryl, how did you get started in nursing? What brought you to nursing? What keeps you here?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Leanne. And the real story of me coming into nursing really goes back to always wanting to be that helper and help people. I was fortunate that as I was growing up, we lived with extended family on the street and even our neighbors who were a little bit older, where I had, I can remember at 10 or 11, I would sit with my neighbor's sister. Now I know as a nurse that she had Parkinson's, but at the time I didn't realize why I was there, except that I was asked to keep her company for an hour and a half. I would do gymnastics and cartwheels and silly tricks on the lawn. And she would, entertain while her sister ran and got the groceries. So I think at an early age, I saw the gift of being able to be of service and in the moment make a difference in someone's life. And there was definitely a part of me that really needed that. Of course, I headed off to university, the University of Rochester. Actually, I was pre-med. I really thought I would end up in chiropractic school or medical school. and was very grateful that there were some nursing students on my floor that influenced me to switch majors into nursing in my sophomore year. And it's just been the most amazing career platform opportunity that I can't imagine, any other role for me through my career. And as you said, listening to you read all those places and works that I've done, when I introduce myself, I still say I'm a nurse and I'm just a lifelong learner. So, certifications and speaking opportunities, authorship, blogs, content, reading, that's just about my passion for lifelong learning, which I know is instilled in all of us in our nursing programs and is really essential in maintaining that nursing practice, that ability to really have a hold in the future and see where technology and changes are taking us, but never lose that human condition and that compassion for caring for someone.
And it's one of the things that always makes me take a breath when I hear the excitement of people with AI. And almost every day now we're hearing examples of situations where people are using AI in areas they probably shouldn't be, and then realizing that because the AI is drawing from all sorts of different sources, some of them accurate and some of them not so accurate. I just heard today about a judge, or a lawyer who had set up one of his legal documents through AI, and it turned out it was citing cases that didn't exist. And so that, of course, came out in court. And so a case he should have won easily didn't. So, but I think, as long as we're aware, it is not the be all and end all. And it still comes back to us being our professional selves and looking at it and saying, does this reflect what I know as a practitioner?
You're absolutely correct. And, I've been really lucky, blessed, honored, all of those words, to have had an opportunity about 3 years ago to really start beginning to understand these are tools. Mm-hmm. Machine learning, large language models, they're tools. They're just forms of modern technology. And in many ways, when I teach this, Leanne, there's a lot of comfort for me drawn from how humans learn and make decisions. I went to the University of Rochester for my initial nursing training, and we were trained on, and the data that we were put into, like, if you can imagine, between my ears is a database.
Yes.
The information that went in, most of us being medical surgical techs with Sorensen and Luckman, and it was the gold standard, and it was what every nursing curriculum across the country used. It was a standard, consistent data that was part of the training. Then every one of us as nurses, when we got into our practice, we took data from the real world, we compared that to what was in our training database, and we made a prediction around whether this was normal or abnormal. Should I be intervening or not? And machine learning, artificial intelligence models, they do the exact same thing. So the point that you're raising is, what's the data that it was trained on? You mentioned this attorney who has using probably a large language model that is what we refer to as making stuff up or hallucinating.
Yes, that's what they said.
The model doesn't know if it's right or wrong, especially if there's something void in its training. So and as nurses, and as a nurse, I am so empowered that I work in a space where subject matter experts like nurses are working side by side with engineers and PhD level statisticians and researchers who are absolutely building responsible artificial intelligent tools that can be used in conjunction with clinical decision support. So yeah. As we've digitized so much data in the last 20 years, which is awesome. But as a nurse, you can't consume all that data quick enough. But the technology can do it, and it can recognize patterns just like we did as clinicians. It can compare what it's seeing in the real current data to what it was trained on and make a suggestion, a predictive type of suggestion to the clinician, who is then aided in their clinical decision making by these kinds of algorithms. Never to replace, and certainly with an awareness, and this is a growing area of what does it mean to build responsible artificial intelligence. And you see, you've seen comments from the White House, comments from the Office of National Standards, comments from AMA, the American Nurse Association, all defining what it means to be responsible, and organizations like where I work looking to those national standards to establish their own policies and then set a course of action for this kind of work. It never forgets the human we're serving, and it really is a great example of the power of nursing.
You have encouraged me greatly and calmed some of my concerns. I enjoy bringing these up because every time I do, I learn from the people who are actually doing this work, and that is really probably good for me. And I have a feeling if I have these questions, other people do also. So we talked about going on the cruise, and the cruise is going to be so much fun. There's going to be aspects of just absolute joy and fun and dancing and fooling around. And of course, I haven't been on a cruise, so it's going to be a learning experience for me, but I expect it will be lots of opportunity to talk with each other for, extended periods of time. Even when we go to a conference or convention, many times there's so much packed into it that the actual, you find somebody you really want to talk to, and then it's like, oh my gosh, the conference is over and never got a chance to really communicate with that person. So you have recently written a book that was published in August of 2022, and that is part of what you're going to be talking about and interacting with people. We mentioned that everything about this cruise and what I'm doing on this podcast is about empowering nurses to really understand we have so much more going for ourselves than what we give ourselves credit for. When I was at the bedside, I even was among those people saying, but I'm just a nurse. What else can I do? And when I was forced out because of injury, I found out, oh my goodness, there's a lot more that I can do, and had no idea and didn't have the courage to actually go and do that. So talk to me about when you're talking to, when you were thinking about doing this book yourself, what were the thoughts that kind of made you dissuaded from doing it? And what were those thoughts that broke through that?
Yeah, it's a great point around those conflicting thoughts that you have. So back to your point, first of all, as a senior care nurse, I am and have always been really passionate about advocacy and how to advocate for seniors. I worked in the clinical practice in skilled nursing facilities and acute rehab for the first half of my career. So I had a knowledge of what those systems were like and how a well-run unit was going to look and feel for patients and families who interacted. Right. And I like to use the word partnership. Huh. My concern, and I really saw this, is when I became an advocate, when I started entering the healthcare system next to my aunt, next to my father, next to my mother, and I was seeing gaps that I knew shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. And I had to come up with a system for my own behavior, my advocacy, that would close those gaps in order to protect my loved one, and do it in a partnership environment. So I wasn't, making people angry, coming in like a, real unpleasant human, because I had such empathy and compassion for the providers. I was that provider.
Yeah.
So in 2009, this book really started forming in my mind, frankly, I had a whole outline, written.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Life is what it was. I had aging family members, young children, and a full-time career. So it wasn't, I think, until I was, kind of into my empty nesting years and starting to really reflect on this system of advocacy that I had in my mind, coupled with the 60 million Americans over the age of 65 who I feel don't have the expert guidance they deserve at their fingertips. So rather than try to call 60 million people, you know, this is a way of taking your ideas, taking your ideas, building it into a system that is transferable and becomes a resource for aging adults as well as their aging children who aren't from the system, who don't have that one side of knowing what should be happening and really feel that frustration when they're in the healthcare system. Just the simple task of medication reconciliation and the fact that 3 people are going to ask you about your medications in the first day leaves every human patient thinking,
what's wrong with these people?
Talk to each other?
Yeah, right.
So just letting them know that that's actually a normal and intentional act that they should look for. In the absence of it, there should be concern, relieves that feeling. And that's the kinds of tips and insider perspectives that I wanted to put in this book, Prepared. It is titled A Healthcare Guide for Aging Adults. And you're right. It took me a year between writing and editing and working full time. It took a year. It published in August, actually, of 2023 and came in paperback just in September. So it's just been about 90 days, like a quarter of space in that market. It was and still remains, really an incredible feeling at the end. You asked me about what was my hesitation? You know, my hesitation was time. Would it be good enough? You know, would there be value? I wanted to make sure that I really delivered on the promise of the book, that people would be prepared for these transitions that happen in healthcare. And I didn't want it to be overly complicated. I didn't want it to be 10,000 pages. I wanted it to be a little fun and memorable. So I think in getting started, I had to face those fears and actually write them down. Here's what I'm afraid of. And then realize that if it helped one person, there was value. And that was worthy of the work and worthy of the time. And the reality is that it's already helping so many people. And I'm hearing from, and it's one thing to hear from your family and friends who have to buy your book. But when you hear from a stranger who was referred from one of your family or friends, you know, they're all connected back to your good work. Your family and friends are your network that make it successful. But it's that one person once removed who sends you a private message that says how important or how helpful it was. Those are the nuggets of feedback that really help solidify that nurses, that my voice mattered, your voice matters. Everyone has a story, and everyone really can write their own book. And it does elevate our voices together collectively when the world sees the power in the intelligence and the information and the knowledge that nurses can share.
I think the anecdotal types of information that nurses can share that many times goes astray. So many times when we're thinking about writing a book, we're thinking about it as being something, you know, almost like didactic or college level, you know, for an audience maybe that already knows what you're talking about. But when you're writing a book like this, you have to be able to relate to what do people really actually know. And for number one, I'm realizing that people in our communities have no idea what nurses do. And partly because we do it so effortlessly, it seems like, or seamlessly, that they don't even realize what it took for us to have that knowledge and have that experience to be able to make it easy for them. And that's what I feel like you are doing with particularly this book, but I can see that also when you're teaching, various different people, you're also looking at that too. How can I make this accessible to these people that I'm talking to?
Yes, and that is really a very important aspect of amplification of your voice, right? Clarity of message. And so I do think when you're embarking on a writing goal, you really want to take a step back and ask yourself, like, who is the audience, and really, what is it that I want to deliver in this message? Like so I said, did I deliver according to the promise? If the book was about you feeling more confident, more prepared, having a system for self-advocacy, can I see that in the words? And I think nurses are particularly skilled at organizing, because right from day one, we've had to gather our supplies. We've had to know everything we're going to need when we get in the room before we go in. And so nurses are really good at thinking ahead, organizing what information they're going to need at what point of time in the story. Excuse me. And so I think when we just step back and rely on those skills and those strengths of organization and cultivation of information, we can put ideas in order. We know when that patient is ready to hear the teaching and the training and the message. We've been doing that. You know, nurses are teachers all day long. I don't know when there's a moment you're not teaching as a nurse, which is a part of the profession that I just love. And I'm so glad that I'm able to take that into my current day profession, that I was able to keep the teaching moving forward. And I think nurses always have the challenge of taking something pretty complex, because our human bodies are not simple. They're made up of massive feedback systems, layered with chemistry, layered with hormones and organ management. And we have to come up with a way of boiling that complex system to something really simple our patients can understand and then utilize in their own management of their health. So I think as teachers, we've been organizing ideas for years. It's a natural strength for nurses, and a place where I think it makes them really good writers when they just tell pieces of small stories at the right point in time.
Yeah. And keeping those stories in is part of the humanness that I think makes it more relatable. I wasn't sure how much we were going to spend time on this, but I have to bring it in. You talked about having your book's mantra it as being something that was funny and provocative and something that they would definitely be able to remember. So you want to talk about that just for a minute?
I do. So for a while, I was thinking I would call Prepared, a healthcare guide for aging adults. I was thinking I might call it Be Your Own Bitch. And this is a system. It is a mantra. But amongst those of us in nursing, whenever anyone that we knew went into the healthcare system, we were like, oh gosh, don't let them go alone. Like they need their bitch with them right now. And really, it's an acronym, right? For being prepared, for gathering information, for using that information to take control of the decisions that you need to make, either for yourself or an advocate, maybe it's your adult child, is making for you. With that information and taking control, the next step is to communicate and to collaborate with those partners. And when you are prepared, when you gather information, when you take control and collaborate, it's towards a goal for which almost all of us just want to be home.
Yeah.
And whether you call home a residence in a community, or you're living in residential assisted living, or you're living in independent living, or you're living in a nursing facility, whatever you call home, we long to be back there. And this little fun little mantra around, BITCH is in your mind. It can be in your heart. And when you're not sure what to do next, you can just say, well, where am I? Okay, wait, I'm gathering information so I can take control and I can communicate. And it puts you in an empowered feeling instead of feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and really unsure what next step to take.
Exactly.
So you'll see that in the book. It's a little fun, but it's an acronym you never forget.
Yeah.
And there's a little feisty spirit there that we actually
and those are the kinds of things that, again, relate to the humanness of most of us. And anybody who is like, oh, I can't stand all this healthcare stuff and I don't understand it, I don't remember it. And then you see that and it's like, oh, okay, I can open up to this and just take it step by step. So one of the things I was thinking of when we first started talking about the book, so let's say I've got my outline in my brain. I've been working on this for, say, a year, like you said. It's been running through my brain just as I'm trying to fall asleep and just as I'm waking up. And so that outline is sort of there. But how do I get started? How do I actually write that first sentence, chapter, whatever it is that we're going to do? How do you go about doing that? And did you have help to do that?
Well, the help that I had was really my own experiences. And I was following an online course. Like when I wanted to write my book, I was following an online course. And part of that course was to, sort of begin with an introduction, really asking yourself, what was driving you? What would be that first story? And I'm a great lover of storytelling. So my book really begins with a story, and it's 3 a.m. And it really is a reflection of what actually occurred for me as a caregiver, living with an aging parent and getting those middle of the night calls. And as much as I was educated and felt that I had confidence, I still felt unprepared in that moment at 3 o'clock in the morning when a change in health had occurred. And I didn't want to feel that way anymore. So I had to change and put a system in place so that when the phone call came, I knew exactly what I was going to do. And so that's really where I begin the book. And I think for anyone who has outlined some ideas, and again, we can talk about different tool sets of how you can kind of put together an outline. I think it helps to bring those personal stories and keep your reader grounded and seeing that your experience, your willingness to be vulnerable, your willingness to be humble and open in your storytelling, they can really relate to that. And then they see themselves in you, and they're like, okay, that person gets me. There's a bond. And now the system, the solution, the pieces of your words that you're going to offer as suggestive steps, they really have a lot of trust in. So I think when you really want to first get going in that in your first writing, I always tell people, just start. Just tell me that story. Go back in your mind and be like, why? What is your why? And tell me your why and tell me your story. And it makes a wonderful introduction.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think certainly I have made the mistake on, and I'm sure others have too, is sort of the idea that it should be perfect the first time. Sort of like, when you start to write it, it should just flow and it should just, come through. So how many times have you rewritten this book or edited and updated and reworked it and changed chapters around? And
like white blood cells and an infection, too many to count. That's actually it's really an important point. I will say that getting a first draft out, that's a really important goal. Just do not edit, do not go back. Your first milestone, big milestone, is just a complete draft. Do something on all of your ideas. I do recommend, you think about a good structure for your book. Now, my book was on transitions, so it made sense that I could go the way it works. You start in an emergency room, you end up in a hospital, then you might go to rehab, then you might go home. And that was a logical structure for my story. Other content may not follow, a time capsule type structure, but that's something in the early phases of writing you think about, like what might the structure take? And my advice is just get those high level ideas down. You go in and flesh out the details later. So to answer your question, I don't know how many times, but it definitely is. It took me longer to edit than it did to write.
Right.
And that's okay. I think that's okay. I had colleagues who were incredibly gracious with their time and their feedback, that read the book and said, yes, this is great. Or I'm not really sure I understood that part, which allows me to go back in and sharpen the pencil, retell the story, look at the language, to make sure that, again, am I delivering on that promise? Have I been clear? Have I been simple? Am I really just giving enough information to this reader that they understand what action steps they need to take? And so, I think that the answer to your question, I don't know how many times, but I really don't want to read it again.
Yes.
And I've said to my family members, listen, if you find a mistake, do not tell me. I don't want to know. It will haunt me.
That's a good point. And there will be mistakes. I mean, as many times as you go over it and somebody else goes over it and your friends or whoever else you're having reading it, it amazes me how many times I pick up a book and there are some really glaring, mistakes in them. And it's like, I just know that when you've read it that many times, you sort of read what you intend it to be and not necessarily what's there on paper. So kind of giving yourself a little grace there. But so you've got the book, it's intact. This is the one area that I hear so many people, but I have no idea how to publish it. If I publish it myself, is there anybody that's going to take it forward and market it? I mean, how do I go through those? I've got this book, I'm happy with it. Where do I go from here?
Yeah, it was exactly the same question I asked myself around this time last year. And as we do as nurses, or maybe we do this as humans, I went to my network and to a nurse colleague who I had seen through social media had published. So I went to get some advice and I did a little bit of research. I was really lucky that I found a woman-owned publisher called She Rises Studios. I chose to go through them for publishing. You could certainly self-publish, and I think there's a lot of resources and there's tons of people out there that'll teach you how to upload your file onto Amazon and self-publish. The challenge I felt was that I didn't have those skills or expertise, and it seemed to make sense to go with someone who was really good at it,
right?
Who could design, who could help you with a cover, physically put it in the right template. They have editors. The editors were great in terms of, going through and doing line edits and really cleaning up those commas and words that should be hyphenated or not that I didn't know. And so for me, I outsourced all of that into this wonderful community of not only women, but women and men who were writing and publishing, who were looking to find their voice and get their story out. And then they also, help with some of those early promotions. They do a light the torch ceremony the day your book launches. And you want to cry.
Yeah.
It's so, you get tingles in your spine. And then, 3 weeks later, they actually host a roundtable conversation that says, hey, it's been 3 weeks. What's it been like? It gives you a lot of support in that, putting yourself out there, whether it was a chapter, an idea, a blog, when you put yourself out there, it's really nerve-wracking. We all have that imposter syndrome, every single one of us. Even though we're experts, we worry that it's not perfect. Back to your words, progress, not perfection. That's what I'm reminded of, that sharing of ideas and helping to promote your vision, your thinking through the lives of others is progress. It doesn't have to be perfection. And so, you can just put it out there. But boy, that that light the torch ceremony is wonderful to have that support from another culture and another community of supportive folks. So that's the path that I chose. It's one that I recommend. I think that, you know, we're experts in our content, but not necessarily how we wrap it and how we promote it. And then go back to your why. So yeah. I'm just as fired up about this today as I was 10 years ago. And yeah. Now just sometimes at night I wake up and I think, oh my gosh, there's so many seniors who do not know what they need to know. I just have to make sure that they find this resource. And once, you know, they like the old Pert or Herbal Essence shampoo, right? Tells 2 friends and so on and so on. Then the word of mouth gets going. But in the beginning, promote your book shamelessly. Everywhere.
Yes.
Shamelessly. You have a wonderful set of ideas, and you in and of itself shall promote. And just because it published 3 months ago doesn't mean it's any less important or you're any less fired up about it. I'll be talking about it, you know, 3 years from now with just as much vigor, because it'll still be relevant and it'll still be needed. Yeah. So,
well, thinking about vigor in the last couple of minutes here that we have, let's talk about the cruise. What are you looking forward to on the cruise, and why should people come on the cruise? You're coming because you're going to talk about, you know, wow, you know, how you can do something that you've maybe wanted to do and haven't been able to, but why would you encourage people to come on this cruise?
Well, I think it's just the perfect combination of caring for yourself, which is essential, caring for your career, which we all need, and caring for our professional space. And we think about how we transform that. So, you know, it's a wonderful place to get into a new environment. You know, a novel physical environment is just great for our brain flow. Yes. All our neurons are going to be firing. The networking with colleagues, people you haven't met, is just wonderful. And you'll have plenty of time to, you know, share your social media, your connections. So you're building your network, not just for the cruise, but for the future. And you're going to get all this new content. And so, again, I think it's the perfect combination of taking care of myself, taking care of my career, taking care of my profession, and a gorgeous boat. What could be wrong? You know, it's a wonderful place for development. I'm really excited about thinking about your career and the ability of, you know, whether you want to comment on a LinkedIn post in an area of your profession that you feel really passionate about, follow those trend-setting, influential speakers. I have, you know, practices that I'm going to recommend to the audience on little things that you do every day that really form your voice and help you to become more comfortable to write the next blog, to take your blog to the book, you know, to take your blog to a chapter and then take your chapter to a book. So there's so many ways that we can level up our career. It's really an exciting opportunity, and you should just get on that boat.
Yes. And it's amazing. I mean, we may not even realize we have passions that we've, you know, have been kind of lying dormant, especially I think people that have been working at the bedside. And it's been a tough slog for, you know, the last 3 years. I mean, I try to remind nurses, you have been through the most difficult point in healthcare for 100 years. And the cool thing is that anybody who made it through that has certain abilities and skills that they have learned that are unique because of what they went through. And so the other part of it is that there's a feeling that, oh, things are the way they are and they're never going to change. And it's such a big thing. But when you talk to other people and you realize, oh my gosh, this is somebody just like me. And they had a little tiny idea and they took it and made it bigger and brought more people into it. So suddenly they're not doing it themselves. And that's been the really great thing for me about some of these things that I've been trying to work on, is it's so exciting to see it grow and see it spread and feel that piece of hope. I could have part of making a change, transforming how healthcare goes in the future. What a great thing.
Just to close on that comment, it's essential. I'll be honest, in the absence of the voices of nurses who have been through the last 3 years, the transformation will be incomplete. It'll be incorrect. Just like I talked about how essential the data is we train a model on. We can't build this model for the future without this data. And the only people, the only ones who have it are those nurses who have been through it. So I encourage all of them to come, tell your story, share your stories, make sure that we have the right data. So when we move forward in the right direction.
Yeah. And bring your friends, bring your family. If they are not interested in the things that will be available for learning experiences, they can just go have fun. And you can have the opportunity of both learning and meeting others. I can't think of a better way to end this. So we're just going to end here. Thank you, Cheryl, so much for coming on and building this little fire of hope under us with, maybe those little passions we've been pushing to the side.
It was my sincere pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.